Yutaka doesn't like when he's not doing endoscopy himself. He gets bored.
So do all of us.
Yeah.
Itching for the action, aren't we?
So, Naresh, are you in Pune or
Bangalore?
Oh, okay. You haven't traveled.
No, I didn't travel. My vaccine certificate says I'm 26. So I'm worried where they'll say this is not valid and keep me back.
26
I've got to sort it out.
Maybe your biological age is physiological age is 26.
Yeah, hopefully. Make things a lot more interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
もしもし。斉藤先生、森です。お疲れ様です。なんかインドのセッション、先生、ちょうど今始まってるんですけど、先生と僕一緒みたいで入れそうですか
So it's time to start.
What the session is about?
Is Yutaka joining in?
Yuchi, you are muted.
So Yutaka is coming in a couple of minutes, so we can start before he comes. But I'm now sending some link to him to be able to join the session.
Okay, we'll start then. So good afternoon. I guess all those who are interested in the session would have logged in. So we have Dr. Yuchi Mori from the Showa University and now in Norway, who's the big guy in the endobrain and artificial intelligence. We have Pradeep Bhandari from Portsmouth, who's the big guy on everything in endoscopy, right from polyps to
I'm not
barracks.
Big guy, I'm a small guy.
And we have Matthew Phillip from Cochin. Matthew's been the president of the Endoscopy Society, and he's about one of the few people who possess the endocytoscope in India. So he would be our local kind of help in this thing. And I have Dr. Kyle with me. Dr. Kyle is a young gastroenterologist who's been with me for the last few years, and she'll help me out with this session. So we're basically going to talk about endocytoscopes and artificial intelligence. Kyle, would you want to start?
Okay. Dr. Matthew, what are the technical challenges when we talk about endocytoscope, and particularly in the upper GI endoscopy? And is there any special preparation that you would use for patients who are undergoing colonoscopy and endocytoscopy?
Yes, thank you so much for asking me this question. See, the biggest challenge in our country is the cost of the equipment. You know that we all conventionally use 190 system. Suppose you want to switch over to an endocytoscopy, you need to have a 290 system. And you know that when you procure a 290 system, if you are using only for your endocytoscopy, then it has got only limited utility. So you have to procure the upper GI and colonoscopy of that machine to use that in a separate room so that you can utilize or you can make it cost effective. And regarding preparations for upper GI and lower GI, what we usually for lower GI is a conventional preparation for colonoscopy that is good enough. And in upper GI, I used to give simethicone. And but in colon, many times, I'm sure Maury will and Pradeep can educate us better on that. The mucin will become a big challenge. So upper GI endoscopy, I just give them simethicone for just to clean up all the froth in the stomach and all. And I use liberally water. Then in upper GI endoscopy, you know that the staining needs to be little changed. I use CM staining in the upper GI, and lower GI I use only methylene blue. I'm sure others can. The biggest challenge I face, I don't know, Maury has given me a lot of time, the technical tips to how to handle it. The keeping the position of the polyp, if it is a smaller one, the respiratory movement, the patient movement, the scope movement, even very trivial movements actually makes a lot of difference in the field of vision. So I think that is the biggest technical challenge is actually to have good vision of the polyp. And if you have got endobrain, then it helps you out. That will come to later.
Okay, so you're talking about the huge magnification. Yutaka, welcome. I'm sorry we started in your absence. You have such a huge magnification. So the problem is focusing in that same area again. So how do you ensure that the same thing that you have with, say, confocal laser and things like that is microscopy, is getting to the same area? What is the technical tip to sort of get focused on that same area again? Because you may be seeing a totally different area just a millimeter away.
No. What I do is actually fix it up with I keep the up knob fixed. Once I see an area of my interest, then I will scan that area and then I keep on taking pictures on that. Then I look at that. And since we have got endobrain, we actually get the immediate picture and the suggestions from the computer-aided diagnosis on that. But I think we can even use the spray catheter. Through that, you can actually fix it and you can actually look at that. But the spray catheter for the upper GI we don't have, because the channel size is not big and the Olympus does not have a size do that. So what I use is actually I use an old ERCP cannula and to fix it up. So I think the best thing I found is that keeping that up knob up so that you can fix it up. But I know that some people have used a cap, but I'm not very fond of it. But I sometimes use when I am using NBI on with the endocytoscope. But preferably for endocytoscopy after staining, I use without the cap.
Dr. Mori, what are your tips to remain focused? Do you use some things like that? What's the thing of trauma with the cap or with these catheters, or even when you get your scope onto the lesion, does it cause some trivial trauma, a little bleeding?
That's a really important point. Actually, we talked this kind of stuff with Matthew very thoroughly last year. And actually, I'm following what he's doing. And I think it works really well. And I think there is no harm in terms of the injury of the mucosal surface. So it works really well. But of course, it will take us some training period if you want to reach some expertise in terms of the stabilization of the tip of the endoscope. But it is feasible if you have a basic skill of endoscopy.
This morning, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, they were trying to look at Barrett's with using the endocytoscope, and there were issues, and we'll come to the technical part of it. But suppose you have a fairly extensive area of Barrett's that you want to really screen. How do you go around using the endocytoscope, or do you just localize an area and then interrogate it, or do you actually study the entire surface of the Barrett's? Dr. Mori?
Yeah, honestly speaking, as you may know, Japan has a country with a really low prevalence of Barrett. So I personally don't have any experience on that. However, if I focus on squamous cell carcinoma in esophagus, what I should do first is to scan the area from a distance to find out the important area to be investigated with use of endocytoscope. After that, I would like to focus on that specific area. Scanning all the area makes no sense because it's a little bit challenging to find interest, the area of interest with use of endocytoscope. So the important thing is to find out the area of focus or area of interest before you go into the endocytoscopic examination.
Pradeep, would you like to take up that issue of Barrett's and interrogation?
Yeah, we've used in patients with Barrett's in the past, and same issue about respiratory artifacts. Then it's very close to the heart there. When the heart is beating, that produces another artifact. There is a lot of mucus. Although you were saying that for upper GI, you don't have, but I'm sure you can get N-acetylcysteine in India. You know,
Yes.
the Pavolax that we use for paracetamol overdose. Yeah, we use that here in UK along with Simethicone, and that works as an effective mucolytic agent. This is a very good technology. This is fascinating. It opens a new window. It gives us an insight into an area that we didn't have before. Having said all that, I'm still very, very skeptical about the clinical utility of this. You typically in UK, you get 7-8 centimeter Barrett's. You can't use endocytoscope in the 8 centimeter Barrett's. You have to identify the area of concern. If you are good enough to identify the area of concern, normally you're good enough to make an optical diagnosis of what's going on. Now, if you're not good enough to identify the area of concern, you can't use the endocytoscope, because where are you going to look at? So it's a chicken and egg situation. It works really well if you're an expert and you know where you're looking for. If you're an expert and you know what you're looking for, you already know what you're looking for. So how is the endocytoscope going to add to it? So I have a very skeptical view. I'm not against it. I really like using it. It gives you very good images. It gives you very good videos. I can give very good talks. I can do some very interesting research studies, look at tight cellular junctions, the leakage through the intercellular space, the effect of various inflammation of how it affects. So it gives us an insight into a lot of things that we don't have right now with standard endoscope. But I'm really struggling in how to use it in my practice. But maybe I'm not experienced enough. I haven't used it enough. So that's why I have that skepticism. Maybe if I use as much as Yuchi has used, then maybe I'll change my mind. But at the moment, I'm a little bit skeptical, and I'm just using it as another toy to play with.
Okay, maybe Yutaka, we'll come to colon and the polyps where there is far more data and thing. So what situation do you think someone should be interrogating a polyp with endocytoscope? Would it be for all, or only when you have, say, a JNet 2B or a 3, sort of kind of a doubtful situation that you would use the endocytoscope?
Oh, thank you very much. As already published by Dr. Mori's group, endocytoscopy will have the additional diagnostic ability compared to the conventional magnification endoscopy. But in our routine practice, we usually use for polyp detection, white light or NBI, and when detect the polyp, we routinely use magnified NBI, and we characterize the lesion with JNet classification. And only for the JNet 2B or some of type 3, we use the pit pattern diagnosis with crystal violet staining. And for such kind of lesion, so we also do the endocytoscopy. In the practice, so we have still the limited data, but we are now going to accumulate the data between pit pattern with crystal violet staining and endocytoscopy, and we could evaluate the additional value of endocytoscopy in addition to the pit
pattern. So what is
pattern.
the number or percentage that you incremental percentage after using endocytoscope compared to just magnification NBI and crystal violet?
Dr. Mori's group, so Mori will show you maybe 3% or 5% diagnostic increase.
So this is both in the upper GI as well as in the colonic polyps as well, or this is only largely in the colonic polyps?
It's only for colonic polyp. And another application of endocytoscopy is available for NBI, super magnification of NBI. For the NBI endocytoscope, methylene blue and crystal violet staining is not necessary. So you can do also the differential diagnosis between hyperplastic and adenoma easily But that is another application of endocytoscopy. But of course, for expert, even in a Western country like Pradeep Bandari, so differential diagnosis could be possible using conventional NBI with optical zoom. So it is not always necessary to use endocytoscope for such kind of differential diagnosis. But for the beginner endoscopist, maybe they can use as well as end brain AI diagnosis. So such kind of situation, it's really clinically helpful.
What about serrated lesions, Dr. Ibrahim?
That's I think the best application. So in my personal experience, even using PIT pattern or magnified NBI JNet, it's really difficult to do differential diagnosis between traditional serrated adenoma and SSL in the proximal colon. But using endocytoscope, we could visualize the nuclei by EC classification, and we could easily diagnose the TSA from SSL. But this is my very limited experience. How do you think about Dr. Mori?
Thank you, Yutaka. That's a nice point. I guess that endocytoscopy is really powerful in terms of the differentiation of the serrated polyps. However, of course, this kind of serrated polyp is accompanied by a lot of mucus, which may hinder the staining process. But I agree with you. Of course, the important clinical value or added value with use of endocytoscope is one of the focuses of our research. And I would say its added value is huge when we focus on identification of invasive cancer or the lesions suspicious of these kind of lesions. But apart from that, I would say the added value is marginal because the conventional NBI has a decent value already. So in our practice, I'm following the Yutaka's initiative. When we find lesions suspicious of the invasion, I'll use endocytoscope to expect some kind of added value in clinical practice. But I'm not sure about the role of endocytoscope in clinical practice in upper GI. So that's why Pratik is kind of suspicious about the role of endocytoscope. Maybe Matthew have some opinion on that?
Matthew, so now you are the end user in India. So we don't have too many polyps. I know Kerala, the number of polyps is increasing. All of us do see, but we don't have the kind of numbers that are there in Japan or in the West. So how do you utilize this endocytoscope in your unit, and where do you find it most useful?
So what I think is, I am very new to this. And this is, as Bandari has told, Pradeep has told, is a new toy. So you tend to use it a little more. When you get a new toy as a child, you tend to play with it more. So what I do is, since you asked about Barrett's, so what I will tell what I'm doing now. When I get a Barrett's or suspected Barrett, I will actually stain the whole area. And I will, before staining, I will use a narrow band. And then I localize an area where I should concentrate more. And after staining, then I will look at the focused, the abnormal area, normal area, and the normal esophagus also. Then I will get an idea what I am seeing. So I agree that this is not going to change my clinical applications much now. Maybe in the future it may change. But in now what I am doing is, I am actually in the learning process. So I am just trying to look at the adenoma, but definitely I can say that hyperplastic polyp, adenoma, and cancer can be differentiated by just doing a high resolution scopy with the NBI. But I tell you, NBI with this scope is much superior than what I was doing with the 190 scope. This one actually can make a much more definitive diagnosis with the NBI, even when compared to 190, which I was using earlier. But adding on to endocytoscopy, when you see the clumped nucleus, I can say that is probably malignant. My endobrain doesn't have I plus, because it doesn't show the invasiveness of the cancer. But otherwise, I think, this has some role in, at least in selected centers, those who are interested. I cannot say that everybody should buy this and use this at the point of time.
Does the zoom lever, the lever that you have is different from the dual focus that we are used to? Does that make a difference in sort of, moving to your high magnification much easier?
Yes, 190 near focus, this is much superior. 290 zoom is much superior. Mori and Yukata and Pradeep all can comment on that. This is my experience.
So we'll move on to artificial intelligence. I think, Kyle, you had something?
So coming to artificial intelligence, Dr. Mori, I have this question to you. We always talk about increase in sensitivity, picking up more polyps with use of artificial intelligence. But does that really translate a lot into clinical practice? Are we just picking up really small polyps, more in number compared to without artificial intelligence? And does that really affect the outcomes of the patient?
Oh, that's a really important point. Maybe the most important point that we have in the area of AI in colonoscopy. So as you mentioned, a lot of increment in terms of the number of the tiny polyps makes a lot of trouble in the current practice, because it will increase the cost of the colonoscopy and also may increase the duration of the colonoscopy, and also it will cause the increment of the intensive follow-up of these patients in terms of surveillance colonoscopy. But nobody knows if this kind of increment can contribute to cancer prediction or cancer reduction in the long run. So what we can do now is just to observe and wait for the result of the large-scale population-based trials. So before getting this kind of evidence, I guess we should continue using that, because obviously it will increase the ADR, but unfortunately, most of the increment is attributed to the tiny adenoma increment.
Can I ask a question to Mori?
Yes, Matthew, sure.
I'm sorry. See, I'm using computer-aided diagnosis for adenoma detection now, but what I have noticed is that it actually gives a lot of false alarms. Any mucosal fold or anything is there sometimes, and if your insufflation is not sufficient, then it actually shows an alarm there. So you have to be careful. So you have to, I don't know, maybe Mori may be able to answer, or you got Pradeep, anybody can answer that. Maybe over a time, I may be able to answer this better, because I think this computer-aided diagnosis for adenoma detection will be a very useful technique, especially when it is used in a wider scale, not endocytoscopy, but computer-aided diagnosis for adenoma detection rate can be enhanced. If you study can prove that this can enhance adenoma detection, I think that is going to be a wider application.
The present use, or what has been cleared for, is basically in colon and colonic polyps, and to some extent in Barrett's carcinoma. In the other areas, in the, say, the esophagus and stomach, we don't have it's not sort of cleared for use. That's one thing. The second thing, we have so many different systems that we have from different companies, and then you have others which are not from the endoscopy companies. Are they all equal? Can one sort of choose one over the other without any thought, or do you have to put in a lot of thought process? Pradeep?
Very interesting. I think I got into this field of AI about 3 years ago. And when we started working with the company, which is not an endoscope manufacturer, I said to them, you have no future. Because if you want to develop AI, you need to be an endoscope manufacturer. But the reality is that maybe in 10 years' time, every endoscope manufacturer will have an inbuilt AI. But for the next 10 years, these independent vendors providing AI platforms that works across all platforms, all vendors, as well as works across different generations of endoscope, they will have a huge utility, because nobody is going to instantly change all their endoscopes in their department. Matthew might be in a very posh unit, very well funded, and tomorrow he can decide that he wants every single room to be 290. fine, but not everyone in India can do that. So that's where the role of independent players come in, that can be plugged into any of your platform, any room, whether it's Pentax or Fuji or Olympus or whichever generation it is, it can work with it. It does have a disadvantage because generally they will have a separate screen. Now I see that as an advantage because, as Matthew said earlier, that he finds a lot of false positive nuisance on the screen when he's doing colonoscopy, and all folds and everything that comes as neoplastic. So imagine if you were looking at two parallel screens, one with AI, one without AI, let all the false positives come on the nuisance screen. You can focus on the main screen if you want to, but slowly as time goes on, all these false positives will go down. Just going back to that point about false positive, I think it depends on what you call as false positive. If a temporary green bounding box comes, you go close to that area, inflate and look carefully, and it disappears, that's not false positive. What it's doing is improving the quality of endoscopy for you. Maybe a lot of expert endoscopists don't need that, but 90% of the audience do need that. So I see a value in all these bounding boxes appearing where there is no lesion, because what that's doing is making the endoscopist go to that area, look at it properly. It takes 10, 20 seconds and then move on. So I think it is a value in having this to improve the quality. Independent platforms also have a huge added value. They work on white light. So if Olympus develops something, they will develop something which is works on NBI. Fuji develops something, they will develop something which works on BLI. And I personally feel that when you're developing AI, why are you trying to mimic the way we practice? Why don't be disruptive? Work differently, think differently. Why are you trying to imitate the exact practice we're doing? You don't need NBI, you don't need magnification if AI can work on white light. And that's where the independent platforms can do that. Olympus, Fuji, Pentax will not do that because the vision they have is they want to promote their endoscopes, not promote just AI. They want to sell more endoscopes using AI. So they will always develop it linked to the patented technology. So I think there are pros and cons, and I just like a lot of players coming in because ultimately users like us benefit when a lot of players come into this market. I don't know, Yutaka have seen a lot of these. He plays with Olympus, Fuji, Wise Vision. I don't know how many other made in Japan. So Yutaka will have a very broad view on this. So what's your opinion, Yutaka?
Maybe Dr. Mori and Dr. Yutaka can come up with a counterpoint on this. Should it be open to non-endoscopy? Would that help? Or can we have a kind of a common platform across?
Yeah, so I think I agree with Pradeep Vandali's opinion. Nowadays, still the AI is progressing in lots of companies, the endoscopy companies, as well as the AI companies. And maybe in the near future, I don't know, but AI is not a special thing. All endoscope has the AI function, and as well as we could use any AI computer, even with any endoscopes. I think so.
I have one opinion about this issue raised by Naresh. So I think if you look at the specific fixed time point of view, there is some difference between the different brands of the AI manufacturers. However, all the AI tools are periodically updated. Actually, when you look at the GI Genius by Medtronic, it was updated once last year. or this year. So the previous version was not working so much good. However, the latest version works really nice. And this kind of thing can be found in the brain series and the other series in the other companies. So I think given everything is updated all the time in the field of AI, we don't have to care about the difference between the different materials or different software, from my opinion. And I would like to agree with the Bandari's idea about false positive findings. You know, usually we make a lot of false positive findings during endoscopy without use of AI. So I think the use of AI highlights the false positive findings in a clearer way. So therefore, I don't care the false positive findings. It will really increase the your attention on the suspicious areas for polyps or cancers.
So according to Dr. Mori, now we need to keep upgrading our AI, like we have to keep upgrading our iPhones every year.
Yeah, updating is very important. However, on the same time, it costs. So we have to figure it out how we can reimburse the AI devices, hopefully by the public insurance bodies. That's a really important issue that we have, regardless of the lands or countries where we live. So currently, to my understanding, there are over 10 AI tools in AI endoscopy field with the regulatory approval. However, we don't have any AI devices which are supported financially by the insurance bodies. So if this discouraging situation continues, updating AI is really challenging. So we have to change the system of healthcare from the AI perspective as well.
Can I make a very quick point? I feel AI in colon will have a huge cost implications and will become implemented in our practice as soon as we can practice, at least in the West I'm talking, and I would like to have a view from what Japan says and what the India says, is if we can practice resect and discard strategy. 90% of the polyps are less than 10 millimeter in size. So if we can detect, make a characterization and resect or leave or resect and discard, then it's a huge cost saving. Patients' complication rate goes down, pathology burden goes down, the whole procedure should become cheaper. So that's when Yuchi's argument about insurance company taking it on and having a dedicated tariff to it becomes a reality. And in order for that to become a reality, at least in the West, we need to have sizing sorted out. So we have detection, we have characterization. If you don't have automated sizing, and we have a lot of data which shows endoscopists are terrible in sizing. We are terrible. We don't size things very well, although experts like Yutaka and Yuchi might disagree with me, but we have done randomized trials with various endoscopists at various degrees of experience. Everyone is bad. No one is good. So we need automated sizing for resect and discard. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And once that happens, the whole playground will change. The whole scene will change.
Just coming to the last point, we all agree that if you don't have a good quality endoscopy, you don't have a great feel, you don't spend time, you don't look around the folds, AI is no substitute for natural stupidity. Right? So there's no doubt about it. Now the question is, where are the barriers for youngsters to do good quality endoscopy? Maybe you can talk about it, what's happening in the UK, what happens in Japan, what happens in the rest of Europe, and in our own country. Where are the barriers and how do we overcome those barriers to get good quality endoscopy and then use each of these techniques? Maybe Dr. Mori first and then Dr. Yutaka.
Dr. Naresh, just a quick interruption. We are almost time now, so I would appreciate one sentence responses from all the three speakers.
We're just winding up. This is the last question anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Mori.
All right, so just quick answer to your question. I think the exposure of the mucosal surface is the streamline of the endoscopy. So we should train endoscopists, junior endoscopists, to take as much time as possible to expose as much area as possible, which is going to be the key step to maximize the effect of the advanced technologies such as AI. Thanks.
Yutaka?
Yeah, and in addition to Dr. Mori's comments, and ADR increase will decrease the colorectal cancer deaths in the future. So that's maybe one of the strong point of future AI.
Pradeep?
I think very soon AI will help you train better, because once AI starts producing your KPI and shows you this is a blind spot you haven't seen, it will alarm that right top sector is not being seen. So the trainee will automatically expose that area and see better. So there is a lot of hope AI will transform our practice, train us better.
And finally, Matthew?
Yeah, I
Any
agree with
perspective?
Pradeep. I think for the trainees, the adenoma detection, computer-aided diagnosis, or the CAD, artificial intelligence is going to make a lot of difference. But having told earlier that basic training in a proper good endoscopy with the adequate withdrawal time in white light endoscopy is mandatory before you allow all these things. But I'm sure in the future, I hope and I predict that artificial intelligence, at least in colonoscopy, is going to make a lot of change, and I'm sure it is going to make a lot of change for practicing gastroenterologists as well as the trainees. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Mori, Dr. Yutaka, Matthew, and Pradeep. I think we had an interesting.
Thank you so much.
And see you all soon, maybe in Kyoto in 2022.
Yes, please. Save the day.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyoto. Thank you.
Right.
Bye. Bye.